Hey everybody, this is Rykard here again, and welcome to another Pokemon Sets video, this time featuring Raticate. Today's video is going to showcase one set for Raticate, but it is possibly one of the most effective and powerful sets that I've ever used with this Pokemon, so I'm very excited to share it with you all. But with that, let's get started like we always do by taking a look at this Pokemon's typing, abilities, and stats. So to start things off, Raticate is a mono-normal type Pokemon introduced in a Generation 1, and it is actually one of the first Pokemon that you even encounter in the game, which is very surprising considering how powerful this Pokemon can be. But as for its abilities, the first one that it gets is known as Runaway, which is unfortunately not an ability that actually works in competitive battles. It does absolutely nothing for you, unfortunately, so you're going to have to go with either Guts or Hustle, both of which are extremely good. Guts is obviously an ability that increases your physical attack when you are statused, which is very cool because obviously Raticate is a physical attacker for those of you that have used him before, and this can make Raticate very powerful, especially if you give it a Toxic Orb or Flame Orb item so that you can auto-induce the status on Raticate, allowing it to boost its own attacks and go for some really powerful moves. But as for its Dream Mode ability, it is known as Hustle, which is an ability that increases your physical attack by one stage with the added side effect of having 80% accuracy on all of your moves. Now this accuracy drop does stink a little bit, but because of the fact that you can boost your attack without being statused like Guts needs you to be, it could potentially be the better ability if you are willing to play with the risk of possibly missing one of your attacks. But as far as the stats are concerned, Raticate, as you can see, is pretty much just a physical attacker in pretty much every regard of that term. He only has 55 HP, 60 defense, and 70 special defense, so it really doesn't have great defenses at all for really taking any hits, so he can't really be a defensive Pokemon. And it only has base 50 special attack, meaning that its special attack is pretty much not going to be viable under most scenarios. But unfortunately, Raticate does have a ridiculous special move pool, which kind of stinks for this Pokemon. But as far as its attack is concerned, it has base 81 attack, which is pretty good in itself, and with the fact that you can also run Guts and Hustle, it boosts his attack to some pretty high levels, making him on par with some even more powerful physical attackers. And it also has a really nice speed stat, being base 97, meaning that Raticate will be very fast and outspeeding a ton of Pokemon. Not the top tier of speed in Pokemon, but very good regardless. But with that, let's take a look at the first set that I have, or first and only set, I guess, that I have for you in this video. So for this set, we're going to begin by giving Raticate a Jolly Nature to increase its speed but lower its special attack. And for the ability, we're going to be going with Hustle as a way to put Raticate at +1, while unfortunately also giving that side effect of our 100% accurate moves being only 80% accurate. But as far as the EVs are concerned, we're going to put 252 into our physical attack, 4 into our physical defense, and then 252 EVs into our speed to give us our max attack and max speed possible with the Jolly Nature. And for the item, we're going to be going with a Choice Band as a way to also increase Raticate's physical attack by one stage, while also locking us into one move. Now, as far as the actual moves on this set are concerned, these are more or less pretty standard on Raticate. However, the whole purpose of this set lies behind the ability and the item working in combination with one another. With the Hustle ability, you get +1, and with the Choice Band ability, you get another +1. So at all times, you could essentially say that Raticate has a Swords Dance up, which is something that is pretty insane for this Pokemon, making it insanely powerful, and also pretty much making it one of the easiest Pokemon to bring in and just wreak havoc on your opponent's team, because no setup is required since your item and your ability pretty much take care of that for you. But as far as the moves are concerned, the first one that we're going to go with is going to be Return. That's going to be your main stab attack to go with. Obviously, we're not using Facade on this set since this isn't a Guts Raticate, but Return is the next best option. And it's 102 base power with max happiness, so 153 with stab in mind, meaning that more often than not, it's going to be your most powerful move. But to get some more coverage on the set, we're going to go with Crunch as a way to deal with ghost types that are going to be obviously immune to Return. Crunch obviously going to hit them super effectively. It is also important to note that the base power of Crunch is only 80, meaning that a super effective Crunch is 60, which is only slightly more powerful than Return is with Stab. So if you ever have any question in your mind as to whether or not you should go with Return or Crunch, for example, if you predict a Psychic type to come in, going with Return is still a very safe bet because, as I said, Crunch is only slightly more powerful when you hit with it super effectively. As for the next move on this set, though, it's pretty much the kind of coverage you want and the tier that you're using this Raticate in. If you want priority, obviously Quick Attack is the option to go with. Having +2 Quick Attack, or priority in general, is really great, and this is a really good move to have for Raticate to allow it to revenge kill a lot of really fast threats that would be outspeeding it and are at a low range of health. So this is definitely some priority that you could really go with. And if you are using this Raticate in NU, I would suggest going with Quick Attack or the second move in this option, which is Flame Wheel. Flame Wheel is more or less there to allow Raticate to deal with steel types because it doesn't have any other way of doing so. And if you use Raticate in a tier above NU, I would suggest going with Flame Wheel if you don't need the priority, just because there are an abundance of steel types in the upper tiers, more specifically like in OU and things of that nature. So Flame Wheel could be definitely useful for more coverage, however Quick Attack is very good for having added priority. And for the last move on this set, we're going to go with U-Turn as a way to pretty much guarantee that we can use Raticate multiple times in battle. It gives it a chance to give you switch initiative if you U-Turn on a predicted switch, and it also obviously keeps Raticate around longer since you don't leave it in battle as you switch out constantly with this move. It also gives you some really good type coverage in the form of Bug type, allowing you to hit some other Pokemon super effectively while also switching out in the process maybe to a safer Pokemon. So it's a really good move overall, and it's really powerful on this set because, as I said before, you're at +2 at all times. So rather than actually give you a demonstration of this set in battle, since it's incredibly straightforward, I figured on the next slide I would just give you a list of Pokemon that you can possibly 2-hit KO with Raticate just by the Pokemon switching into one of your attacks in order to take the physical move that you would go for. So let's take a look at that slide right now. So picture this scenario. You bring in Raticate safely, hopefully, maybe after something else dies, and your opponent thinks in their head, I have to switch out to take a physical move from this thing. So they switch out, take Stealth Rock damage, and then also take a damage from one of your attacks, and then realizes that they probably cannot live a second one. And that's pretty much how this list was compiled. So it's basically all the Pokemon that you could 1 or 2 hit KO that are commonly seen as walls that would want to be switching into your moves and then realizing that they cannot take a second attack because of how much damage you're going to do with one of your moves. Some of the most surprising things on this list, though, to me were Alomomola, because that thing is super defensive. Now, it can protect potentially to live a second return from it, but either way, it's still a pretty solid 2-hit KO on this Pokemon, which is ridiculous considering that this Pokemon is seen as one of the most useful physical walls in NU. Another interesting thing to note is that Qwilfish, despite the fact that you get the Mummy ability after the first Crunch, is still a 2-hit KO after it switches in on Stealth Rock, which just goes to show how powerful this Raticate is. Qwilfish is again known as being one of the most defensive Pokemon to run into in the UU tier, and Raticate can still do a number to this guy. It's also important to note, I guess, Tangrowth, that is another Pokemon that is seen as being a very powerful physical wall, but again, you can just rip right through that with 2 returns. Slowbro as well, and the list goes on and on as I showed right here. Pretty much every wall in NU gets 2-hit KO'd by return, which is pretty important to note. And it's just pretty impressive just to show you the amount of damage that this Raticate is able to do just by going for one of its attacks, because it's at +2 at all times. Now, as I said, there is that added side effect of only having 80% accuracy on your moves, and also if your opponent does predict correctly and, you know, switches out into a Pokemon that would be able to take the return or the crunch if you kind of predicted wrong, you could always just U-turn if you expect that to happen and switch out into an appropriate counter, which is really great as well, since U-turn is going to do a ton of damage when you switch out anyway. So overall, this set is just ridiculously powerful. I know I mentioned it previously in like a grab bag video, but I really wanted to go in depth as to the extent at which Raticate is able to dish out some massive damage to your opponent's team just by being hustle, boosted, and banded at all times. But that is it for this video, everyone. So as always, take care, goodbye, and I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching, everyone.